almost all of the climbers who are coming to me to climb Aconcagua are doing it with the hopes of doing something bigger. And what I've learned over 20 something years of doing this is if you can go to 7,000 meters without oxygen and you can sleep at 6,000 meters without oxygen, sleep. You can survive a night at 6 without oxygen and you can summit 7 without oxygen. I can now safely take you to an 8,000 meter peak with oxygen. You've proven in a mountain that's still dangerous, but a mountain where we can get someone off pretty effectively because there's no ice, no glaciers, no crevasses, there's helicopters, all these things we're talking about. Like, it's a place to test your body, to find the line, to find the limit. Hello and welcome to the Duffel Shuffle. I'm Adrian Ballinger, and we're here to discuss the world of climbing and skiing in all its forms through the eyes of mountain guides.
And I'm Sam Kickoff. In each episode, we'll unpack exhilarating stories, share invaluable insights, and get up close and personal with some of the most experienced and passionate guides and athletes in the industry.
Whether you're a seasoned alpinist or a weekend warrior, the Duffel Shuffle is your ticket to the thrilling world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. Join us.
All right, episode 41 of the Duffel Shuffle podcast. Adrian, I'm excited for this one. You know, we've been talking for a little while now about mixing it up a bit. We've had some awesome guests on, and the guest episodes I think have been incredible, and some awesome insights and people to talk to. And I mean, most of the conversations I haven't wanted to stop, even though I am the one that always stops them. But you know, we've also gotten some great feedback that these episodes where we don't have a guest and we just talk about a topic or a place or a peak or whatever, people are really enjoying those. And so we had the idea of launching a 7-episode series about the 7 summits and kind of breaking down each of the 7 summits. And this is our first episode where we're going to dive into that. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Hello, Sam. But let's be honest, you just don't want to schedule guests because it's fucking hard.
Yep. That is certainly a factor. The scheduling of you and me and another athlete who's traveling around the world is quite a nightmare.
If anyone wants to write in and tell us what amazing scheduling AI bot we should be using to never have this problem again, let us know. Or if anyone would like to volunteer their time and be the Duffel Shuffle scheduler. We have lots of needs as we grow.
But no, I am excited. You know, we did that episode on K2. And for those that haven't listened, a few episodes ago, we had an episode on K2. And I mean, honestly, it was one of my more favorite conversations because I got to ask some questions of you that I don't know the answer to. And that's always a cool one. And so for me, it's like a little bit of a game of like stump the chump, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure I'll get stumped. I'm pretty sure I'm the chump in that example. But no, I agree with you. And actually, it is also fun. You kind of mentioned this, but we do get a lot of feedback from our listeners, and we have been hearing so much. People love our guests, but they also really want us to talk more. So here we are, talking more.
Right on. Well, before we dive into that,
what are you doing?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we got to chat. We got to catch up first.
We do need to catch up. I feel like has it been months since I've seen you?
Probably.
It's been time. I've seen your wife a couple of times in town.
It looks like you're back in Vegas.
Yeah, you won't see me now. I'm back in Vegas. I flew down to Vegas with Arrow and our friend Amelia yesterday. So just arrived. Emily's off doing more movie premiere work. She's actually in New York this week doing PR, and I think she went to a gala. She had to get a super fancy outfit. It was pretty hilarious. Yeah, I think someone did her hair and makeup and stuff. It was awesome. She went to a gala. All I know is she texted me at one point and she's like, Anne Hathaway is presenting right now. I think it was the real deal. So I'm here, and yeah, it's that time of year, that classic time of year where it starts snowing at home, but it also rains a lot and it's kind of gray and cold, and it's still awesome. I trail ran right before I left, and it was trails are beautiful and it was a lot of fun, but it's also a time where I don't necessarily want to be one of the first people on skis hitting rocks. At this point, I did a lot of that a little earlier in my career, and now I'm happy to kind of wait for a good base, and I know I have a really long season ahead of me. So coming down to the desert right now, it's, mid 70s every day, mid 50s every night. It's just amazing. I'm like watching Arrow like almost fall into barrel cactuses and run into Joshua trees. And I'm like, this is what we do here. Let's see how this goes.
This is the desert. Yeah, it's a funny time of year. It's like, people are skiing, but I think, I went water skiing last week. I'm not into snow skiing yet, but I went water skiing last week. But it's kind of that time of year where it's like anything can happen on any day. And, most days are sunny and nice, and in the sun it's warm enough to be in a t-shirt and flip-flops. And you get in the shade and it's definitely chilly. And then, occasionally, like every 7 to 10 days, we get this, 1, 2, 3 day storm and drop snow up high. Some crazy people go try and ski it to say they did. They really risk injury and ruining their gear. I have an opinion, but I'm not going to share
post.
it. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
I'm going to be the less jaded, grumpy, old, crotchety man in this one. Like, I do appreciate like the stoke that it brings everyone. Like, everyone kind of rolls their eyes, maybe, but also like, it's so rad. People love skiing that much, and I have loved skiing that much, and I still do, but I temper it a little bit more with like reality and not wanting to get hurt. But when I walk into a gear shop, like I actually went to Bellingham last week for a Black Diamond event, and like half of the 120 people there had already skied. They're also coming to like a nerdy like ski event at a shop, right? But the stoke is so great. And it takes that level of fire, the people who ski every month, just to be able to ski every month, no matter how terrible conditions are, or walk thousands of feet to ski a couple hundred feet. Like, I am for it. Let's go.
Yep. I'll reserve my comments there.
And I'll be in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, it's funny. I'm stoked too. I think the snow really gets me excited for winter. And, like we put my 2-year-old ski boots on his feet the other night and he walked around the house and now he's just begging to put them on and do that again. And so it is fun to get into that mindset. For me, the early season skiing just has never been worth it. And it's always like you're so on the edge of injuring yourself and ruining your entire season that now I just decide not to. And so I'm more justifying my own opinion than anything.
This is just us being old, but it is true. We will know 1 or 2 friends or acquaintances that are out for a big chunk of their season because of their October, November skiing. Every year I know a couple, and the risk just is higher. It just is.
Yeah. So anyway, here we are. It's October, November. We're getting into it. This episode will come out in early November, but we're recording a few days before Halloween here. And speaking of October skiing, I got to go back to Jim Morrison's ski descent of.
This is your news story.
This is my news story. I'm diving in.
Awesome.
We talked about it last week. We actually talked about it like the day that it had happened, hours after the press release came out. And we didn't really know what we could say, what was going to be public information, et cetera, et cetera. And I think as a result, we maybe didn't share the stoke that it deserves. And so I just have to bring it back because I think it is truly incredible. And since the descent was completed, all of the people involved are home, and there's been some clips that have been announced, and Jim's done some media blitzes and, gone out and done a little bit of a media tour. And so we've gotten a little bit more information. People are starting to share stuff, and it's something that deserves more conversation because it is truly a groundbreaking descent. And on top of that, one of the things that I think is really cool and maybe hasn't been talked about is it's also kind of a groundbreaking ascent. There were 5 people previously that climbed that line up the north face of Everest. And, this fall, 12 more got added to that list. So that list went from 5 people, up to 17 people in a single day. And that's pretty incredible. I think anytime you have 12 people on a route that only has seen 5 previous ascents, I'm sure it was a little bit chaotic, but it's really rad that like 12 people went up that route as part of this team. Those people included mountain guides who were fixing the route. It included Sherpa who were supporting the climb. It included cameramen, and obviously Jim with his skis. And it's just pretty incredible that many people went up Everest on the north face like that.
Yeah, it's so rad. Like I still just am sitting in this place that I can't wait to see the film, to dive so much deeper into it. But yeah, your point is a good one. Obviously, people have been trying to both climb and ski this route for decades and snowboarded, and I've had a number of friends be unsuccessful. Corey Richards, Conrad Anker, Kilian Jornet, all tried to just climb this route or a variation of the route, basically the Hornbein, the Upper Couloir from the Nepal side, instead of linking it with the Japanese couloir, which makes it a much more logical ski descent. So it makes a lot of sense they were on that side. And of course, we now know, I think it's public out there that, Jim and Jimmy tried for the last 2 years. This was the third year to try. So I think it put those previous attempts put in perspective how difficult the climb side is. None of those expeditions failed to ski the line. They failed to climb the line. And so, yeah, you got to climb before you can ski. So the skiing is monumental and so, out there, but so is the climb. So I like the way you frame that. There will be a lot more. I'm sure we'll learn a lot more. I think we're a podcast of like realities. And I think my guess is this style that was done, it was more of what people in the old days called siege style instead of alpine style. So we have to remember some of those 5 ascents previously were done in alpine style, meaning 1, 2, or 3 climbers, nothing on the face, no fixed ropes. And they started from the bottom and they went to the top. Some of those ascents were also done without supplemental oxygen. So we do need to keep the ascent in perspective. Jim's focus was a ski descent, as I understand it. And so the style of the climb was a little more set up for what was necessary for filming, capturing all these different things. But siege style, if that is the style it was climbed in, meaning so fixed lines, carrying loads, pre-placing a lot of different things throughout the route, probably some climbers that didn't go to the summit but did work down lower. It's more of this military model. If that is how the climb was done, of course, like it's monumental and it put 12 people on the summit safely. It is different than the alpine style ascents of previously. And at least as a mountain athlete like myself, if we were talking about climbing, that's the style that would be most important to me. Without oxygen, small teams, limited fixed rope use. Again, in this case, this style allowed for something totally different and was completely appropriate as a style.
And that was the ski. And I think, we've gotten some clips of this ski descent that have been put out on Instagram. And just watching Jim ski, 9,000 feet of what looked like to be quite variable conditions. He skied it well. Obviously, it's, we're talking about a different style of skiing than you might be used to in the ski movies. It's like one turn at a time, hop turns down, very variable conditions. But you know what? He did it in a way that is impressive. It's just so impressive. And seeing some of the imagery from this route, I agree. I can't wait to see the film. It's going to be probably just one of the most spectacular ski mountaineering climbing films of our day.
Of our generation. Yeah, the skiing, of course, is not Matchstick or TGR. That's actually like, I gave a slideshow last week up in Bellingham about skiing Makalu, the 5th tallest mountain in the world. And that's how I started the slideshow. It was like a 30-second clip of me making jump turns down a steep face with exposure below. And then saying like, if you planned on coming to the Matchstick movie, like you're in the wrong room. Like it's playing at the theater down the street because it is so different. But based on what I know of the conditions, Jim like skied with confidence. He linked turns a lot.
Yeah.
And like I was impressed with the style of skiing. And I remember feeling the same way. I think K2 with Anjay was one of the first times a lot of the footage came out because of drones of someone skiing an 8,000 meter peak. And there were just endless forums on like Teton Gravity research of people ripping his skiing. It was like, those are people that do not understand. Like this was a very like fluid and impressive style of skiing for what it was and where it was. So I just loved seeing that and can't wait to see more. Yeah, I'm just so stoked it worked out.
It's pretty incredible. If you haven't seen the footage, check out Jim's Instagram or Nat Geo's Instagram and dive into some of that footage. It's just wild. And, skiing at 29,000 feet, as or close to it, is just something that's totally different. So Pretty impressive. And, hopefully I have no interest in scheduling Jim to be on the Duffel Shuffle podcast right now, because I'm sure his schedule makes ours look like a nap break. But one day maybe we can get Jim back on the podcast. He was one of our early episodes, but would be great to get him back on and hear a little bit more firsthand about that experience up there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be super fun. And I bet we can.
All right. What do you have?
Well, I mean, gosh, news has been so fun recently, actually, because I think the reality of these sports and activities that we do is we spend a lot of time talking about things going wrong and death and suffering and failed expeditions. And recently, the news, we've just been on a run of like amazing things that are changing our sports or showing the change in our sports, actually. Like these pins we can put in things like Jim Morrison's skis, like Anjay's ski, like Kilian's project in the US. And, I feel like we just saw it again in Yosemite. So that's my news. Connor Herson, who was on the podcast a few months
episode
ago.
34. Check it out.
Episode 34. I love that you have this data. Way to do your homework. Connor Herson is a young, just crusher, a Black Diamond teammate of mine. I actually just spent a week with him at Black Diamond's Athlete Summit 2 weeks ago in South Lake Tahoe. And that was kind of his break before diving into his Yosemite season. And Yosemite season is kind of like, this is the height of the season right now. I would say it's kind of like mid-October to mid-November in a normal year. There's these big rainstorms that come through and everyone takes a break. Actually, one happened while we were on the Black Diamond Athlete Summit. But then it's also good temperatures for El Cap. When you climb on El Capitan, you climb in the sun a lot. So this later time of fall is a really great time to be there. And we just got news that Connor, I don't even know which one to talk about. They're both so big. First of all, I think freeing the nose in a day. So Connor freed the nose over a number of days a few years ago as a really young kid, and it was super notable and kind of put him on the map. We talked about that in our podcast. But this past weekend, Connor freed the nose in a day. So that means climbing with only your hands and feet, using a rope. That's what makes it free climbing, not free soloing. Using a rope to catch you if you fall. If you fall, you need to descend back down to the bottom of that rope length and climb that pitch again without falls. He did the nose, one of the hardest routes on the face, in less than 24 hours without falls. He could have fallen and gone back down and then got back up, but he just didn't fall. And I think it puts a pin in things. Of course, he was capable of that. He'd already freed it, and he had freed other routes in a day. I think it's notable because if I have my facts straight, it's only been freed in a day twice before. By Lynn Hill in the 90s, which basically broke climbing, a woman being the first to free this really difficult route on the nose in a day. It was just shocking. Then Tommy Caldwell in the early 2000s, but 20 years ago, Tommy at his prime. Sorry, Tommy, I'm sure you're still in your prime. I take that back. But Tommy at the height of his powers did it, and it was still considered just so monumental that this second person had done this route in a day. And now 20 years later, Connor comes along and does it. I'll stop there and then we can combine it with what makes it even more impressive. But any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think one thing to note is that, and I don't know the time that it took Lynn or Tommy, but Connor did it not only in a day, but he did it in 9.5 hours. It's not like he was 23 hours and 47 minutes, just made it in, just 9.5 hours. It's kind of like a casual day out for him, it sounds like. I mean, it's totally wild and impressive. And, you put your name on a list with Lynn Hill and Tommy Caldwell, and doesn't matter what you've done, it's pretty rad. Yep. And when that list only has 3 names on it, you've got to be pretty psyched. And so I'll let you continue, because he did that 3 days after doing what?
Yeah. So impressive. Connor, I got to see him climbing, just bouldering and in the gym and stuff like that while we were in Tahoe. And he's just, his granite wizardry combined with his fitness, combined with his stoke and passion and wanting to be out every single day, no matter what. It's clearly coming together into something really special, a moment in time that hopefully continues for decades. And I think he took the semester off school or the quarter off school, which is...
He must have, because he spent more than 2 days in the valley, right?
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, he'd only be down Friday to Sunday. So I think that's also opening up some of this ability to wow, imagine if he wasn't splitting his time between school and climbing, even though I'm like so psyched he is splitting his time between school and climbing. I think it's rad. But so, yeah, just before during the nose, he completed a route that I think is a first for ascent and also something he's been kind of like working on or thinking about for years called the triple direct on El Capitan. It's actually a combination of the hardest parts of three routes, which is why they call it the triple direct. It's a very direct line. I think you rated it 14A, or maybe it has been rated. I'm not sure if he gave it that rating or other people have, with the plan of doing this. All the pitches have been freed, obviously, just not all together. And Connor called it the hardest route he's done on El Cap. So it's just another demonstration that he's able to, work on these really hard things that have never been done before, combining them with these huge fitness things, doing it all together with lots of not much recovery in between. I mean, it's just shocking.
Yeah, it's funny. We had Connor on the podcast, like we mentioned, episode 34. Great interview. And he kind of is leading the charge of this new generation of valley climbers that grew up climbing in the gym. Most valley climbers that are in history to date didn't have climbing gyms as a resource when they were growing up. And so they
Or at least
learned
they kind of sucked.
Yeah, it was different. It was different. Anyway, Connor comes from this gym climbing background, and obviously he has a load of experience in the valley specifically from a very young age, but he climbed in the gym. And it was funny talking to him because I totally expected him to have this kind of gym background and also this like very curated, manicured training regimen with diet and coaches, et cetera, et cetera. And his response to our questions about training was kind of like, yeah, it depends if I get my homework done in time. Yeah. And it was just like, he has so much natural ability. And obviously he's training, he's trying to push the bar and, work on certain fitness aspects. But his priority is school and his education, and climbing seems to be somewhat secondary in his life. And I'm sure in his brain, there's like a little bit more of an equal share, or maybe it's swayed slightly more towards climbing, but he just presented.
We're going to try to pull him over to the dark side of being a full-time pro athlete. Like, engineering's cool and all, but have you seen posting Instagrams and making TikToks?
Exactly. I mean, but how many people do you know that are like basically leading the way in their sport? They're at the highest level of their sport, and it's kind of like their secondary focus. Like it's just unheard of.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And the other, and I think that ties into what I've been seeing, but I've been doing a lot of presentations and community events. We were just at Rocktoberfest in Kentucky, which is thousands of like passionate climbers, most of whom are not pros. And like, Connor Herson's name was on so many people's lips. And these are sport climbers, not even trad climbers, but like, and he, along with, I think, some of the other members of this kind of like next generation, Will, who just freerider or flashed a freerider in less than 24 hours. He's 20 something and in college. And I think what that kind of like meant to me is like, this excitement is so good for our sport. Everyone's talking about it, and these kids are young and they're finding balance, to your point, and they're still crushing what their like elders ever did in the previous generation. I just feel like a decade ago there was kind of this feeling like the best of Yosemite had happened, the best of the Himalaya had happened, and now we just keep getting on this podcast and telling more and more stories of like, no, there is so far to go, and the next generation is so damn like fired up and excited and inspiring to like the previous generation, and inspiring to so many kids who are just like frothing now to go to Yosemite because these guys did.
Yeah, absolutely. But that to be said, Jim Morrison, I think, is in his 50s. So you can be pushing the bar at an older age as well.
Very true. Well, Liz, I mean, there's a funny reality. I mean, why do you think everything I've done notable is in the 8,000 meter peak world? Like the 8,000 meter peak world, number one, like definitely caters to strategy and experience over strength, pure strength, like it just does. And then fundraising. You can go to the valley in your dirtbag beater Toyota Camry or hitchhike with no money and dumpster dive for food. That is still happening in Camp 4. it costs no money. It is a place that being young makes that living easier. The highest mountains in the world cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the reality is fundraising gets easier as we build our networks, get older. And
Yep.
that was so clear to me. Like, I think I would have done better stuff in my late 20s and early 30s in some way. I might have died, but I would have done better stuff in the Himalaya at that age. And I could not get the funds.
Yeah.
Today, like, and I recognize the privileged place I'm in, but I have more funds for expeditions than I am willing to use because I'm also balancing family and things like that. So it is completely flipped.
Ah, it's interesting. Well, that's our news, and we're going to dive in. We've got an awesome episode coming up. We're going to be talking about Aconcagua, our first of our 7 Summit series, so stay tuned. All right, so we're kicking off our series, Adrian. This is the first episode of 7, talking about the 7 summits. Today, we're diving into the world of Aconcagua. I think a lot of Aconcagua climbers for this winter season out there are probably starting to get excited, starting to gear up. Hopefully their training is well underway. And I figured it'd be a fun one to kick things off with. So Aconcagua is located in Argentina. It is the tallest summit in South America and in the Americas. And how many times have you been on Aconcagua?
Oh, shoot. I was going to rewind. Am I allowed to rewind?
Yeah, rewind.
Without any editing. But I just figured, does everyone know what the 7 Summits is if they're listening to the Duffel Shuffle podcast?
That's a good question.
And
I hope so.
I mean, we could do a whole episode on the controversy around the 7 Summits. But for now, we won't do that. We'll keep it super simple and just say the 7 Summits. The idea is it's the tallest peak on each continent. There are different ways to define continents and continental plates and political
Geology.
borders and all these different things. We're going to stick with just, the 7 summits, tallest peak on each continent. Let's stop there for now. Maybe we'll do an episode if people are interested in why that is debatable. And it was popularized. I think Dick Bass did it first, owner of Snowbird, kind of came up with this way to structure his climbing. Why not try to do the tallest peak on each continent? And it's really, I think that was in the 80s, and it's really stood the test of time because, I think a lot about it. And, sometimes, quote unquote, real climbers, alpinists will poo poo the 7 summits. But if you think about, or if I think about it, it is so, so rad. Each peak is really different. They are very difficult to get all the pieces together: politics, permits, weather, health, and the actual climbing. Then none of them are generally the hardest pure climbing, which I think is why they get shit talk sometimes, but they get a lot of notoriety. But the cool thing is they bring you to some of the wildest places on the planet. And again, kind of structure that travel. If you play golf, you go and play different courses around the world. If you ride bikes, you go and ride some of the most famous trails in the world. Well, this is this incredible list that encapsulates some really, really cool parts of the world and climbing. So the 7 summits, guide companies like mine, we actually don't guide all 7 summits every year, primarily because Denali is such a pain in the ass, the permit system that we talk about sometimes on this podcast, but Alpenglow literally can't guide it without giving every penny that we would theoretically make to another company. It just doesn't, we're not really able to give the style that we want to because of the way the finances work. So we don't guide all of them, but we guide almost all of them every year, some of them many times a year, because I love them. We love them. And there's such fundamentally great ways to go climbing in the mountains and to build a progression to a mountain like Mount Everest. That was my background. Now to your go ahead.
No,
Sam.
I think that's good. I think, for those younger listeners, shocker, Cody Townsend did not invent list-based objectives. They were invented well before his time. The 7 Summits is probably one of the earliest list-based climbing, skiing objectives out there. And, Will Cockrell in his book, Everest Inc. talks about Dick Bass a lot and his kind of use of the 7 summits to drive his climbing. And I agree with you. I think the coolest thing about the 7 summits is your experience and your exposure to travel through this activity. And I think that's one of the things I talk a lot about loving is traveling and adventuring with this activity and this common sport. And when you go from Aconcagua in South America to Everest in China or Nepal to Kilimanjaro in Africa and the others, you're getting this total adventure around the world. Some peaks are harder climbing, some peaks are easier climbing, but you're getting exposed to different cultures through this activity, and that's something I love. So that's why we're talking about them. All right,
Absolutely.
so back to where I was, Aconcagua. How many times have
Aconcagua.
you climbed
I
Aconcagua?
I knew you were going to ask that question as we were doing this. I did zero prep for this podcast as always. I've been more than 10 times. I have been less than 20 times.
Perfect.
Yeah, good, good enough.
Sounds
My
about
company,
right.
Alpenglow Expeditions, has been dozens and dozens and dozens of times. It's one of the really fundamental programs and expeditions that we offer, that we love, that we first really differentiated ourselves with rapid ascent and showing how much faster this climb could be done with pre-acclimatization and excellent logistics. So it's a mountain I think about a lot.
Yeah. And so Aconcagua sits at just shy of 7,000 meters, 6,962 meters. For those in the US, 22,841 feet above sea level. It's a significant peak. Talk a little bit about like the significance in that Aconcagua brings to climbing and to the progression that climbers go through, and why Aconcagua is notable outside of it being one of the seven summits.
Yeah, so we often call it a 7,000 meter peak. In fact, I had actually forgotten it was not exactly 7,000 meters until you just said that. We just call it 7,000 meters or 23,000 feet. The reason we do that is such an important level before going to the giants of the Himalaya, the 14, 8,000 meter peaks. Knowing how you perform, in my opinion, without supplemental oxygen. And maybe we'll
We'll
talk a
dive
little
into
bit
that
about
later.
that. And with the expedition style that a peak that big brings, super hot weather, loads of wind. I'm sure we're going to talk about some of these different components. But it is such an important stepping stone. And it is the only 7,000 meter peak outside of the Himalaya. And so that's kind of where it sits in my brain, why it's so important. The other really big thing is it is almost completely non-technical, meaning you don't need ropes, crampons, ice axes very much. And we should also chat a bit more about that. But to be able to climb a peak this tall and really explore altitude and what that means, and the fitness side of climbing big mountains, endurance, fitness, speed that can be done on Aconcagua, almost can't be done anywhere else except maybe on the Tibetan side of the Himalaya, where we can go above well into the 20s in sneakers. Aconcagua has kind of always been famous for that, that in a good season at the right time of year, you can climb Aconcagua in sneakers. And that has kind of made it a playground and leading forefront of a lot of the speed climbing and FKT type climbing that we've seen people like Carl Egloff, Fernanda, Tyler Andrews, people like that doing and kind of making famous.
Yeah. And so talk about the season of Aconcagua. What does that season look like for climbers?
Yeah, the season on Aconcagua, overall, from at least from a business perspective, I don't often put my like business hat on this podcast, but like it's an annoyingly short season. Like I wish we could guide this mountain 6 months a year, or at least 4 months a year. Like there's two big seasons in the Himalaya, spring and fall. In Ecuador, we can guide 6,000 meter peaks 7 months a year, 8 months a year. Aconcagua is really tight. Traditionally, December, January, February. That's it. The rest of the year, it is far too windy. And even during that season, winds are probably the greatest challenge other than altitude. So it is a tight season, which means the mountain is quite busy. That's certainly a factor to think about when you go to the mountain. And it just, weather is just a huge piece of the puzzle. It's a short, tight season, and the weather sucks even during that season.
Yeah, I feel like Aconcagua is interesting in that, I've heard of many climbers getting shut down on Aconcagua, similar to how you hear climbers getting shut down on Everest or in the Himalaya. And you just don't think about Aconcagua or peaks outside of the Himalaya having so many challenges with, like, you have a 2 to 4 week expedition and you are unsuccessful. That because of
Yep.
things out of your control. That just doesn't seem to happen as frequently outside of the Himalaya, Denali. But
Yeah, and it's a
Aconcagua,
funny one in that because like the biggest peaks in the world, if you don't get the weather window in your 5-week trip, you're often going to stay, and the guide company's ready to stay, and the mountain guides are ready to stay, and the Sherpa are ready to stay, and the clients are ready to stay. Aconcagua isn't quite big enough, or people don't think of it in that mindset.
yeah,
And so they're going for, on our trips, 2 weeks, on a normal trip, 3 weeks. And when the weather doesn't come together, it's a much more difficult conversation as, do you stay? Do you go back to base camp and reset and go up again? And yet, to your point, it's remarkably common.
yeah,
One thing I'll say along those lines, in the 7 summit progression, many people are doing the 7 summits to get to Everest. Actually failing, to me, on one of the earlier mountains is super, super important to me.
yeah,
Learning how to turn around, how to be humbled by the mountain, how to own that, and what to do next. Stay, reset, go back the next year, say you didn't care in the first place and quit the sport. Like, going through that process is one of the fundamental reasons why I think Aconcagua is so important. So when I'm watching, we'll send a few teams down there this year. When I'm watching the weather forecast and seeing the big winds coming, I mean, of course, I want everyone to be success, but I'm like, oh, now people are going to be doing their jobs, the guides, but also the members, of working through the fact that climbing is still hard and a lot of it's out of their control.
yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into your experiences on Aconcagua. Do you remember your first Aconcagua climb?
I do. It would have been back before I started Alpenglow Expedition. So late 90s, early 2000s with Earth Treks, the company I worked with and learned so much from before starting my own company. It would have been a traditional 23-ish day trip. So, and usually with people, certainly for Earth Treks, almost always with people who have climbed first in Ecuador and gained 6,000 meter experience. Then they went to Peru probably to get intermediate 6,000 meter experience, or a second trip. That was back in the day when we really
Extend that
required much
progression.
more experience than we do today. And then they went to Aconcagua to try like the beast. And like Aconcagua, that's really what it was all about. Back then, there was no portering on the mountain in the 90s. There were very simple, locally provided base camps, and that's it. Everything above base camp was on your own. So we did double carries, if not triple carries, between every camp. Front 3-day walk into base camp with burros, 2 to 3 days, and then a couple of days in base camp resting and trying not to get sick. And then double or triple carries with 50 to 70 pound packs. For a long time, it was the only trip that I kept my what were those old Dana design packs? Like 140-liter backpacks that weighed 8 pounds empty.
Yeah.
But they were so padded, your hips could actually handle huge loads. This was the mountain I needed that for, because we would be doing these massive carries up ultimately 3 camps above base camp. So I remember, for me, it was very early in my career. I was probably 22, 23 years old. I had now spent quite a bit of time in the Ecuador-Peru zones, guiding 6,000 meter peaks. I had been to Nepal, climbed my own first 7,000 meter peak, which was Ama Dablam, a very technical 7,000 meter peak that wasn't fixed back in the day. And then I had this opportunity to guide Aconcagua for the first time. So I remember being like really psyched and intimidated by the work. Like I'm not built like old school mountaineers and guides were. I weigh 140 pounds. Heavy loads are difficult for me. I get really cold. And those are all the things that Aconcagua was known for, being super fucking cold and having to carry huge loads. So I remember being intimidated. I also remember loving the process. The other thing I remember, I think I was single at the time, and Mendoza, the capital city, is just like one of the greatest small cities on the planet. And like, I still say that to this day, probably because of those early experiences of being like 22 years old in this South American city with amazing wine and amazing food. Nothing cost anything. Clubs, not one night a week, but 7 nights a week, go through the night until 8 in the morning. Like, it was a magical experience.
Sounds like a lot of hard work.
I mean, those are the experiences, honestly, that like formed this like lifestyle, like to where I couldn't imagine going back to medical school like my parents expected me to. I couldn't imagine going and getting like an analyst job in an investment bank in New York like all my Georgetown graduating friends did. Like I don't believe in glory days, but like they were glory days for me, right? Like
Yeah.
being on an expense account to like a place like that, doing something really hard physically where we all thought you tell yourselves you could die, and it's true. I think it is the deadliest like mountain in South America. Like so, you know, you have that, and then you have this counter. Like I couldn't afford a bean burrito out at a restaurant in the United States in my early guiding days, but down in Argentina, I
You were
could. Like
balling.
it's just magical.
Yeah, I mean, Mendoza is a place that I haven't been, but everyone that goes and climbs Aconcagua tends to talk more about their time in Mendoza than their
Yeah.
time on the mountain. Funny how that is.
Leafy, green, small, walkable city with some of the best food, coffee, and wine on the planet. It's hard to overstate how good it is. You know, now we're going to like the Francis Malman restaurant, if people are familiar with who that is. But like Alpenglow definitely does it right, and that city like just begs to be done right. Wine tours are incredible, all of it.
So obviously Aconcagua was a lot of hard work, but it's not known for being the most challenging. And, I've had clients in Ecuador, they have a great time in Ecuador. They love climbing in Ecuador and they're like, where should I go next? And I always have this, conversation with them. It's like, do you want to go higher or do you want to go harder?
That's
like
right.
there's two directions that you can go from a place like Ecuador, and one is higher, and that's where Aconcagua fits in, and one is harder, and then you might find yourself in Peru or Bolivia or elsewhere.
You got it.
And so talk a little bit about the climb itself. Obviously, it is hard, challenging, but not technically difficult. It's, I would say, arguably less technically difficult than like Ecuador. Talk a little bit about the
Sure.
actual climbing and what that entails.
Yeah. And again, I see this as a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
A big thing I've learned through guiding all these decades is being able to like, and it's no different than any other sport or activity, being able to break up new challenges and learnings into different like kind of like components or chapters. Like it just works really well. And so I love that you go to one place, Uray, let's say to work on ice and steep climbing skills, and you go to somewhere like Argentina to work on altitude and expedition, like
Suffering.
planning and suffering and functioning. Yep.
Yeah.
And they two like separate those components. That's why we love Ecuador, that you can stay in a beautiful hut in haciendas and then just do the glacier part of the mountain instead of all the rest with the camping and the suffering. So, but yeah, the climbing on Aconcagua, and I keep pausing because it is important to caveat, because there's a number of accidents every couple years in Argentina on Aconcagua when people think it's non-technical and can be done in sneakers, and they get a season or a period of the season when that is not the case. So the reason Aconcagua is generally non-technical is it is in a desert. It is insanely dry in this part of Argentina, almost on the border of Chile next to Mendoza. And so, like, insanely dry. And so that means there's no glaciers on the mountain. Essentially, there is still some permanent snowfields, especially on the south face. Remember, southern hemisphere, so things flip. But on the normal routes on the mountain, which climb more of the north side of the mountain, there's no glaciers. So that means no big cracks, crevasses, which means we don't have to use glacier rope systems. And because of how dry it is, there are now seasons when you can go all the way to the summit without ever touching snow or ice. There are also many seasons when you cannot do that. So I guess I just want to keep repeating that. Everyone should go prepared for snow and ice. And one of the funny things is back when I got it in the 90s and risk tolerances were higher, we didn't wear helmets, we didn't carry crampons, we didn't carry ice axes. And if the snow was like scary, if there was snow and it was scary and hard, you just failed on the mountain. Or you had a very enterprising guide who would like chop steps and then pray that you didn't blow it and fall off. Today, we bring all those things, and we should bring all those things. You have no idea when you get there which season it is, because it's not really even a season. It takes one storm to put a foot of snow, which because of the wind turns into 4 inches of ice within, a couple of days. And then it's gone from being a sneaker run to something very serious. and slide for lifes happen there every couple of years, and they're really scary. But with that caveat now very well established, 80% of the time, 95% of the mountain is on sand and dirt and rock and not on snow. And it's incredible. It's often frozen mud and sand. It's very firm, but it means that there's a high degree of safety. You might use a rope just as a little short rope with your guide or something like that. You might pull out an ice axe because the mud is actually that firm, but you might be better off with 2 ski poles. And that's all the way up the mountain. And so all the way to the summit potentially. And that's what enables us to really focus, like we've been talking about, on these other components of the climb.
Yeah, and so Aconcagua is kind of the foray for a lot of people into an expedition where you're not staying in huts and going back to a city like Quito every day, and you're actually out there in the mountains camping, moving camps up the mountain. So generally we have a base camp and 2 camps on the mountain, I believe. And we're moving up, acclimatizing, and having more of a traditional expedition style experience.
That's right. If you walk into base camp, you're going to walk from probably the road at like, I'm going to make up numbers. Someone can tell me how wrong I am, but you're going to walk from the road at like 6,000 or 7,000 feet up to base camp between 12 and 14,000 feet. Then you're going to put 3 camps in on the mountain between 14 and 20 is usually the highest camp, 19 to 20. That's another reason I love this mountain so much. Sleeping at 20,000 feet is something people basically haven't done yet in their career, almost always. Because again, the only place you can do it is basically the Himalaya. And it is a very like life learning experience. It's quite painful usually. And then you're going to go to the summit 3,000 feet higher. So that's kind of the breakdown. A very important change, though, is the commercialization of these mountains. So again, we're talking primarily about, guided climbing, or at least logistics supported climbing on Aconcagua. There are other routes on Aconcagua. Maybe we'll touch on those that are not established as commercial climbing lines. But there are 2 main commercially guided or logistics provided climbing lines. And so an important change just over the past few years is it up until the late 2010s, we did what you said, or what we were talking about. We carried all our own camps. We set up our own tents, and we kind of like moved up and down, getting higher and higher. Now, kind of in the Himalayan model, there's a couple of local logistics companies in Argentina, very successful businesses that work super hard. They now provide all camps on the mountain, and the camps stay for the whole season. And before people are like, Americans are like horrified about that, like the Grand Teton is like this, right? Like there are camps up on the Grand Teton run by Jackson Hole Mountain Guides and Exum, and people just move through them all season, and they're taken down at the end of the season. That model has now moved onto Aconcagua, and you're not forced to use those camps, but the vast majority of climbers now hire those companies, use those camps, use those cooks that are based in those camps, and lighten their load. No one needs a Dana Designs 140-liter pack anymore. Our members are now climbing with 55-liter packs. And I say this like an American style or a Nepal style. It's actually probably an Alp style, right? Like Alps mountain guides never carry more than a 35-liter pack because they have huts. This is still one big step below huts, but it's enabling people to move more efficiently in the mountains with lighter loads, maybe enjoy more of the fun side of climbing versus the suffering style of climbing. And we do buy into it on the mountain. I think it does make a lot of sense. And actually, we now see a lot less trash, human waste, all these things, because these established camps are managing all of those things for the people to pay into the system.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting in that it makes it more accessible for a lot of people. It makes it a little bit lower barrier to entry, not having to carry your own loads, carry all your own equipment. But at the same time, it's good. It's the best way to manage the volume that a peak like Aconcagua experiences. Having everyone carrying their own tents means that when you have a windstorm and some tents get messed up, they often get left behind. Whereas if they're managed by companies that are responsible to the national park, it just creates a much better management of volume on these peaks. So,
yep. And like, if we need the kind of like disclaimer, I don't want this on all mountains in the world. I don't want this on all routes on a famous peak, but we're talking about 2 routes on a mountain with dozens of routes on one mountain in a mountain range, the Andes, with thousands and thousands and thousands of mountains. And so I think there is a place for both styles. And to your point, the popularity of these mountains, and maybe we'll touch on this, but like this is a mountain I actually stopped guiding in the 2000 aughts because I didn't think I could lead a trip I was proud of because the mountain was getting so dirty, so destroyed, having so many accidents. Like literally, you could not walk along the trail without getting toilet paper, used toilet paper blown up by the wind and like hitting you, hopefully not in the face, but like on your jackets and shit like this. Like you literally couldn't avoid that. Everyone was horrified. Everyone was sick. Things needed to change. And because the popularity wasn't going to go away, it was the tallest peak in South America, and it could be done by a relatively inexperienced climber, even though there's lots of accidents and all the rest. So, like, some of these decisions have to be made, and the mountain is now being managed in a way that I'm really proud to offer trips there. And I still have lots of ways I can go out and make people carry big loads on other mountains.
Yeah. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Aconcagua sits in a national park in Argentina, and it's managed by the National Park Association. And a lot of these regulations and how things are operated are controlled by the national park. What did that shift look like? And was that a smooth transition to kind of changing a lot of the standards on Aconcagua, or was it rocky? Do you have any background there?
I wasn't privy to like the local like machinations of it. There was always a permit fee. It was it was always controlled in some way. From the best of my understanding, in that, like I founded Alpenglow in 2004. I probably ran like 3 more years of Aconcagua trips before stopping, let's say in 2008 or 2009. What I remember at that point is like the permit fees actually weren't cheap. They were probably like $400 per person. And yet the money was clearly not going anywhere into the park. There were no rangers. There was no rescue. There were no rules. There were a few companies, actually a couple of companies trying to do a good job, but then just being swamped by companies doing a bad job. If this sounds familiar, it's not surprising because it's exactly what's going on in Nepal right now. But what seemed to happen is our company pulled out. We were a tiny nobody at that time, but so did some of the big players. They all pulled out and were like, we can't do this. Looking for a different route on the mountain, a different side, something to do. We see this in Elbrus too, people trying to find a different route on the mountain before. Now no one's going to Russia. But so from what I understand, enough big operators pulled out that it became this very serious thing for the national park and for the good local providers that were trying to do things well. They all got together, they pushed forward, they made changes. It took years, but the big changes that I know happened, the permit price actually doubled, more than doubled. I think it's probably over $1,000 today. I should know.
I think it's actually closer to 2.
Maybe it's close. Yeah. So
yeah.
Permit fee went way up at a time in South America where people were horrified. Like, this will destroy climbing. No one will come anymore. Stuff like that. They dramatically raised the permit price. They hired climbing rangers and medical personnel to stay all season in the park and are not hired by the companies. They're independent of the companies and seem non-bribable, which is a good thing. But I don't know how they do that. Maybe they just pay them well. So they do have that separation. And I mean, those are really the 2 biggest changes. Having people in all the camps actually enforcing the rules that they probably had all the time and charging enough money to actually be able to pay those people well. Those are the big changes that I saw that brought us back and other companies. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but also the number of local logistics providers shrank. I think there's only 4 companies now. There might be 5. And all of them are actually offering a pretty good level of service. Like, of course, I'm here to tell you mine's the best, Aconcagua Vision. But, I think Grajales does a great job. And they're kind of locked in that little bit of like battle of who has the best base camp. One gets Starlink, the other one gets 2 Starlinks. One gets a pizza oven, the other one gets a homemade pasta machine, But that's great. They should have at it at base camp. Above base camp, I think things should stay simple, well managed, focused on safety and health and things like that. But it's been a really impressive and nice change. And it leans into like, we were slightly worried as everyone has to hire a company now. And we were a little bit worried about like how we differentiate ourselves and things like that. But it turns out a company like mine gets to differentiate in the ways that are actually important to me, which is not who's got the best espresso machine. It's like who's got the best guides, people, and kind of like safety net behind those guides to offer a trip with fantastic decision making, a high likelihood of success, and just great people you want to spend time with in small groups. Today's podcast is brought to you by Alpenglow Expeditions, a Tahoe-based guide company with an international reputation. In its 20th year of operations, Alpenglow leads the highest quality expeditions in some of the world's greatest mountain ranges, from California's High Sierra to the rugged Himalaya. Alpenglow runs more than 40 international expeditions per year, as well as offering a full menu of guided ski and climbing courses throughout California. Join us and experience the Alpenglow difference.
You talked a little bit about kind of the traditional Aconcagua climb where you trek into base camp about 3 days and then you move up the mountain slowly. How does Alpenglow do it differently? And you talked a little bit about having the guides, but what does an itinerary of an Alpenglow trip look like and how is it different?
Yeah, so we've always been the company. There are companies out there that you can get whatever style you want on every climb. Like you can get with helicopters, without helicopters, with porters, without porters, in a huge group, in a tiny group, walk up the mountain backwards, forwards. There's so many different choices and they all cost different amounts of money. Alpenglow's model has always been more or less like if there's a best way to do a mountain, and what the best way is just like what a small group of guides are like, this is the best way. We love it. We fight about it. We argue about it. And then we put out, this is the best way. Our best way on Aconcagua is a rapid ascent expedition. So people pre-acclimatize at home, not as long or as high as Everest, but they're going to spend 4 weeks in the tent and hopefully be pretty good to 14 or 15,000 feet, which is the height of base camp. Then they're going to, after a day or two of eating great steak and drinking red wine in Mendoza, they're going to helicopter to base camp and skip the trek. It's not because I don't love trekking. It's that trekking is a really easy place and time to get sick, and that remains true today. We want people to be pre-acclimatized and get straight to base camp and into the actual climbing. That's the focus of this trip. It's kind of like trekking to base camp on Everest. And what I always say is like, do the trek, but do it some other time, and there are plenty of better treks in South America than the trek to base camp on Aconcagua. So we fly helis in. Once we're in base camp, a couple of days in base camp, and then we move up because we're pre-acclimatized. We can do a little bit less double carry type stuff now that we don't need to move gear. A lot of companies are still doing double carries, but with nothing in their packs because they're acclimatizing on the mountain. We're able to save that until a little higher on the mountain, but we still use 3 camps on the mountain. We climb something called, it's not, most people call it a 360 route, where we climb on a much less busy but more expensive side of the mountain. So we climb from the Plaza Argentina side. It's much quieter. It's harder to get to if you're not using a helicopter, which keeps some people away, and it's more expensive logistically because it is harder to get to for burros and things like that. So it's much less busy than the normal route. And this is one of the few mountains, because of the infrastructure on the mountain, where we climb one side and descend the other. We do a full traverse of the mountain. So we climb the Plaza Argentina side and descend the Plaza de Mulas side, or the normal route. I think it is so rad. And you just don't get to do that on very many mountains because you have to pick up your camps. We don't have to pick up our camps here. So I think it makes it really magical. We generally spend about 9-ish days on the mountain itself. And that breaks down in really different ways based on weather. Usually weather and winds are the biggest challenge. So whether the more of that 9 days in base camp waiting for a storm, or is getting up high and then coming back down, or is the traditional like 2 nights, 2 nights, 2 nights, it really depends. But one way or the other, the goal is to get into this highest camp at almost 20,000 feet, spend just a few hours of hydrating and eating whatever your body can stand. And then summit day is really hard. It remains really hard. Going 20 to 23,000 feet in the weather, there's almost always wind. Everyone's moving very slow because you're not acclimatized on any trip above 20. No one goes up to 21 and then drops back down and rests, and goes up to 22 and drops back down and rests. So the model is you're trying to acclimatize to these lower altitudes. And then on summit day on any mountain, you're trying to just barely squeeze in what your body can physiologically do. Because otherwise you'd have to spend weeks longer on the mountain. So summit day is always going to hurt so much, but that's what you're trying to, that's where the change happens, right? That's where the learning happens. That's where the growth happens. Like that's the whole point. It's meant to be hard. So summit day will generally be anywhere from, a really quick group would probably do it in like 5-ish hours up to the summit, that last 3,000 feet. An average group is probably more like 8 hours. We might let it stretch a little longer than that. The catch is you need to get to the top and then not come back to 20,000 feet and spend a second night. While that occasionally happens, that's where pulmonary edema, cerebral edema, sickness, and death is so much more common, is after you're exhausted and your body can no longer maintain. So we want to get back to that highest camp, pack up our stuff, and continue down as low in the mountain as we can go. And that's why everyone ends up having a 15 to 20 hour summit day, is because of that descent. That isn't just for fun or because I love to make people suffer. It's to get people to an altitude where we know they can survive a hard night.
Awesome. So Aconcagua seems to have some hot topics, whether it's equipment choices or how long an expedition is or what have you. What are some of those kind of like big questions or hot topics that you've battled with over the years? Right now I'm specifically thinking about equipment. Any like equipment choices that you might recommend to someone who's head to Aconcagua this season?
Hot topics. That's so funny. I'm like trying to be controversial. I don't have anything really controversial, I don't think. The biggest thing I think about Aconcagua, and hopefully is, hopefully people listen to this that are getting ready to go. It's a much colder mountain than people think. And actually, it's hard because it's a much colder mountain only on summit day when you've already made the decision to leave behind your biggest jacket and your goggles and your mittens, because you're in the desert in South America and it hasn't been that cold. You haven't done any other moves at night. You've been moving during the day when the sun's out, and then you're maybe a little protected from the wind. And then all of a sudden on summit day, like it is not unusual to do our summits in 50 plus mile an hour winds. Like on Everest, we don't go if it's more than like 25 miles per hour. But this a mountain where if you didn't go when it was more than 25 miles an hour, you'd never climb the mountain. No one would have summited in its 250-year history. And so like we need the equipment and the preparation and the strength and confidence and good communications between guides and members to be able to handle that. There is a real risk there. But so, yeah, if I was giving a person advice, I'd be like, our gear list looks like you're bringing a lot of extra crap. Bring it all. And like, you're going to make decisions if you overdid it, but don't underdo it. The same is even true of boots. Like I keep talking about, we can climb this mountain in sneakers, but on summit day, I'm wearing like a G2 SM, like a Sportiva, basically 8,000 meter boot.
Yeah.
Double boot, one level below what we wear on Everest, but only one small level. And if, of course, we can all go and look at the photos of runners. Kilian's running it in sneakers. The key is he must not pause or make a mistake because he will lose his toes.
Yeah.
And he is fully willing to accept that to do something cutting edge. And because he has so much confidence that he will not stop moving. You, whoever you is, I cannot make that same guarantee. Maybe I have a bad day. Maybe I get sucked into a rescue. Maybe I need to help someone else and stop moving for a half hour. Countless reasons why I might need to stop or at least reduce my heart rate from, 150, where I'm staying nice and toasty, to 110, and suddenly I get frostbite. There is a massive amount of frostbite on Aconcagua every year, like many cases, and almost everyone is inexcusable and a choice not to turn around in time, not to listen to the body, or to have gone too lightweight because it's more fun. It is more fun to go super lightweight, especially sneakers versus boots. But the risk is so real there. So that's my hot topic.
Yeah, I mean, those equipment choices were something I was alluding to. It was an interesting one. When I started working for Alpenglow, I had very little familiarity with Aconcagua, and I was running through equipment lists for some reason. And it was like, I think the thing that really caught my eye was, and I don't remember which, I think it was, there were crampons on the equipment list, but no ice axe. And in my brain, it was like,
Yeah.
well, like, why would you have someone bring crampons but not bring an ice axe? And
Yeah.
after learning a little bit more about the mountain, it makes total sense in that kind of rare situation that you have like the potential for a little bit of slippy surface, but not really long distances or frequent instances of that. And then also having like, these, you're talking about like a climb with very little snow or no snow, yet you're in double boots and you have a, 7,000 meter down parka, and you're just like, the equipment list reading through it didn't totally make sense in my brain at the time. And so I think those questions are something. And to this day, I hear people in the office like asking questions, should I bring this item or this item? And Aconcagua seems to be,
it elicits a lot of those questions.
Absolutely.
Puffy pants is another great example. Like, it's something that's not really in your kit, in most people's kit through a certain amount of climbing. And then it suddenly becomes something that's just like the best piece of kit you can possibly imagine. This is a great example because number one, of course, they're warm, but number two, they go over everything. And that's really important on these big equatorial mountains because like there will be times in this mountain that if you were in like a hard shell or a soft shell and long underwear, you'd want 4 pairs of long underwear under your soft shell. And there are other times when you want none. Well, you can't have that because you can't stop, take off your crampons, take off your boots, take off your soft shells, take off your pair of long underwear. You're not going to cut them off. So the way to be able to adjust to that is actually have just one pair of long underwear under the soft shells or hard shells, whichever you choose. Maybe it's 2 layers if you're super cold like me. And then you add on puffy pants with zippers and you can throw them on for that 4 hours of super cold heinousness up high. And then you can have them off right away again as you're going down. They will become an essential part of your kit, even if you've never worn them before on a mountain.
Yeah. So 7,000 meter peaks generally are not climbed using supplemental oxygen. Yet it seems like that might be another hot topic regarding Aconcagua these days.
Yeah, so it's just 2 years ago we saw people, 3 years ago, we saw a couple of guide companies starting to put people on oxygen to get them to the summit. So people that in the past, we would have turned them around at 21 or 22,000 feet, and then they started going on it. That was just a couple of years ago. Before that, Alpenglow was one of the very first companies on Aconcagua to start carrying oxygen for rescue because there's now a great helicopter system that generally can get up to the high camp or almost the high camp at 20,000 feet, but there's basically nothing above that. And it's still a really hard mountain to get off of. So we started carrying oxygen mask and regulator for emergencies only to get someone down. And maybe that was the beginning of the slippery slope. Then we saw people starting to put it on to go up on that summit day. And now people are offering it as oxygen the entire climb. Some is like Everest prep, learn how to use your oxygen system. Some just to make it easier. Some because it sounds a lot more fun than spending a month in the pre-acclimatization tent. God, I just don't know if I'm just old, but I really dislike it. And that's not like mostly I think anyone should climb the mountains however they want to. And mostly like I can imagine a scenario it's like it's this person's life dream to climb this mountain and they can't do it otherwise. And why can't they use it? And they can. I think for me, the challenge is that almost all of the climbers who are coming to me to climb Aconcagua are doing it with the hopes of doing something bigger. And what I've learned over 20 something years of doing this is if you can go to 7,000 meters without oxygen and you can sleep at 6,000 meters without oxygen, sleep. You can survive a night at 6 without oxygen and you can summit 7 without oxygen. I can now safely take you to an 8,000 meter peak with oxygen. You've proven in a mountain that's still dangerous, but a mountain where we can get someone off pretty effectively because there's no ice, no glaciers, no crevasses, there's helicopters, all these things we're talking about. Like it's a place to test your body, to find the line, to find the limit. And with oxygen on these lower altitudes, you're absolutely not doing that. And then even if Aconcagua is your life dream mountain, like it seems to me that the outcome is meant to be unknown, that the likelihood of failure is truly significant. It's not 50% for any climber Alpenglow spring. You have a better than 50% chance to summit this mountain, but you certainly don't have a 100% chance. And the two things making it really difficult are weather, which is still relatively out of our control, except for great weather forecasting, and altitude. And I might just be crotchety, but like, I'm not ready to take away one of those two challenges. So, yeah, that's my perspective.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I think, I haven't been to Aconcagua, so it's hard for me to really form an opinion on it. I think it'd be unfair for me too. But it is interesting. And I think anytime there are these shifts in style and how things are commonly done, people challenge them. People don't agree. Some people do. And it will be interesting in 5 to 10 years to see what that standard becomes and whether it remains oxygenless with oxygen as the emergency resource, or if oxygen becomes more commonly used on peaks like Aconcagua. And I'm sure that if oxygen is commonly used on Aconcagua, it will be more commonly used on Ama de Blanc and Peak Lenin and some of these other,
Definitely.
7,000 meter peaks that are used as kind of the test piece for more bigger stuff in the Himalaya.
Definitely. If I can throw out two more things, like, because we've obviously, because the market is asking for it, we're getting calls about it quite a bit now. So we spend quite a bit talking about this, and it's kind of one of the fun parts of Alpenglow, right? Again, like Logan, Monica, our expedition doctor, Topa, or my co-expedition leader on the big mountains, me, we just sit around and proverbially drink whiskey and talk shit and try to figure out where we feel. And like, we did talk about, like, if we ever did do this, because it's being requested so much, it would be a standalone expedition that's the with oxygen Aconcagua climb, and it is a completely different thing than the without. It does not qualify you to go to 8,000 meter peaks. It's not mixed in, so someone's like just getting the shit kicked out of them, suffering and doing it because they think it's important, and someone else is like strolling along, like, like, it's a standalone thing. It is a different experience for a different reason. I can imagine doing it that way. Again, I think everyone should climb in the style that they want to, that they believe is best. The other thing I'd just say, like, because it is just a slippery slope and just a line we draw in the sand. But like, the other thing that I think is important about the line is, like, Everest, the vast majority of human beings cannot genetically climb Everest without oxygen, to the best of our understanding with science. I don't want Everest to be the playground of only, 0.0000001% who are genetically lucky like me and have all the time and everything else. On the other side of the coin, the vast majority of humans can go to 7,000 meters without oxygen. There are exceptions. I've had those few glass ceiling people in my career that no matter how hard they try, how hard they train, how many years they come back, they can't break through a certain altitude. Whether it's 18 or 20 or 21. That is the dramatic exception physiologically. If you are willing to work hard enough and suffer and put the time in and gain experience, you can climb Aconcagua without oxygen. And so I'd like to see it stay there.
Yeah. Well, I think there's no argument that using oxygen on a peak like Aconcagua will make the experience easier. And I think that a climber has to ask themselves, why are they trying to make an experience easier? And if they have a good reason for that, by all means.
And just because it's my hobby horse, like, let's not forget, Everest just got climbed in less than a week, in a weekend or whatever, by two different teams, by using unlimited high flow oxygen. We know there is not a mountain on the planet you can't make easy with oxygen if you choose. And so, to me, that's just another, why we shouldn't do it everywhere.
There we go. All right. Closing thoughts on Aconcagua. Why should someone explore going to Aconcagua?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about the technical sides, and obviously I just got on my hobby horse about oxygen, but like, Ama de Blanc today is one of my absolute favorite mountains on the planet, and I don't think it gets nearly enough credit in that way because of kind of the hangover of how it used to be dirty, because it's non-technical. The overall experience, from amazing city to amazing trek if you choose to do it, or world-class helicopter ride, to a very difficult physical mountain, but with pretty good logistics and reasonable margins of safety, if done well. I love it so much. And it is such a stark, beautiful part of the world. Can't recommend it too highly.
For those that are confused, Adrian did just say Ama de Blam is his favorite, and I think he meant Aconcagua, but our Ama de Blam team is like on Ama de Blam as we speak, and so his
and you
brain
just
is in
mentioned
two
Ama de
places.
Blam. It's just in my head. Oh,
Yes,
blowing it.
Aconcagua is what you were speaking
Aconcagua.
about being one of your
Yeah.
favorite places.
Yeah, like I haven't been since before COVID now, even though Alpenglow runs a few trips every year. And actually, I just talked to Em, like, maybe the Aconcagua logistics needs like a second look. It's been a few years. We should send an owner down. Because I love it. And I watch people really, really struggle there in all the right ways.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, Aconcagua is interesting. As a guide, I have this challenge in that a lot of guides go to Aconcagua and they guide 2-3 trips a season, season after season after season. And a lot of companies that are looking for guides to work Aconcagua need that. They need that from the financial side. They need a guide to go down, work 3 back-to-back trips, season after season after season, and understand the logistics and the mountain and everything. I really want to go climb and guide Aconcagua, but with my family situation, having 2 young kids, like committing to many weeks away from home, 2 trips is 4 weeks, 3 trips would be 6 weeks. Committing to season after season is not in the cards for me. So maybe you and I should do a Duffel Shuffle guided trip of Aconcagua next year.
Yes, let's do it. See if people want to come out and climb with the Duffel Shuffle.
There we go. We're putting it out in the world, and if people pursue that, we'll make it happen.
Great.
Aconcagua sounds like a great place to explore the mountains and a great country in Argentina, a great city in Mendoza to explore, and getting to explore Mendoza and having a goal of climbing Aconcagua on the side is a cool way to go about travel. So we're all for it.
Absolutely. And now with, to plug Alpenglow, which we don't do too much on this podcast, I don't think, but like the rapid ascent, there might be no mountain in the world where rapid ascent, pre-acclimatization, and really high-end, well-done logistics work so well. The 23-day version of this trip, it's pretty dusty. It does feel long. The 2-week all-in USA to USA version of this trip is like something I could do year after year after year and not be like, oh, what a grind. So
yeah.
It works.
Absolutely. Well, oftentimes I feel like the trips are like 11 days, 12 days. They're even getting done a little early. So more time in Mendoza.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, that is our first episode of our 7-episode series talking about the 7 summits, which Adrian nicely explained what they are because I failed to mention that to start the episode. If you have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. And we hope that you guys continue tuning in for more info on the 7 summits.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Duffel Shuffle podcast. You can follow along on Instagram, where we post our favorite clips from each episode, as well as more about the world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Catch you next time, and until then, we hope you enjoy some time outside.